Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and once again, it's great to have you guys here on this Thursday. Before we get into today's rundown, I just want to remind you guys to get your comments recognized, and for donations and tips, make sure to go to streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show. And for bonus coverage materials that are not covered by this broadcast, make sure to go to patreon.com and search up GSMC Sports Network. So, now that we got that in, let's talk about what we are going to discuss on today's show. So, starting off the show, we'll talk about some trade candidates that could possibly be moved at the trade deadline. So that'll be the first part of the show, so we'll get into that in a second. Then in the second part of the show, we'll go through the injury report heading into Week 6. So that'll be the second part of the show. The third part of the show, we're going to talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and whether or not they are legit. So that'll be the third part of the show. And the final part of the show is previewing tonight's game between the Denver Broncos and the Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead tonight for Thursday night football. So that's the rundown for today's show. Forgive me, but if you can hear in the background, there's some background noise. My neighbors are getting some work done on their house. So we're going to be hearing, well, at least I'm hearing it. I don't know how well you could hear it on your end, but that's probably something we're going to have to deal with for most of the show. So just bear with me as we work through that. So let's get into the first part of the show, which is talking about the trade candidates going into the that could possibly be moved going into the trade deadline. So, NFL released a list of players that could be moved. So we're going to go through that. Also, CBS came out with an article too, with some guys that could possibly be moved as well. So we'll go through the names right now, and I'll give my thoughts on them as we go along. So they start off, so this is with the NFL.com article. So they start off with some Minnesota Vikings. Kirk Cousins, obviously, he is probably, the biggest name, which now it was reported, I mean, Jay Glazer was saying it. I forget what show he was on that he said that, but it doesn't seem like the Vikings are going to move him. In fact, the Vikings might try to extend him. But listen, the Vikings season's kind of spiraling out of control, especially now with Justin Jefferson getting placed on IR. And the Vikings right now are 1-4 and probably aren't going anywhere this year. I mean, you never know. They could get right. But it just seems like with them, they just are kind of always shooting themselves in the foot. It seems like with the turnovers that they've had on the offensive side of the ball. Brian Flores is the defensive coordinator now, and the defense has been, I guess, better than last year, but it's still not great. So, yeah, the combination of all those things, and it just seems like also last year they went 11-0 in one-score games. This year they're 1-4. So, it seems like everything that went right last year is going wrong this year, and now especially losing your best player, now being placed on IR. At this point, it's kind of a lost season for them. And Kirk Cousins actually is having a very good season. But, at this point, they might be looking to tank. But they could keep Kirk Cousins. So we'll just have to see. But that's what Jay Glazer said. So we'll see what happens there. Unless somebody gives the Vikings an offer they can't refuse, a team that could need a quarterback. I mean, I think I talked about it yesterday or on one of the previous shows. I mean, you look at maybe the Falcons as being possibly a team. The Jets, we don't know what the deal is with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, apparently, he's saying, "Oh, I could be back by the playoffs," and then you got guys on television saying Week 13, which is not realistic at all. I just don't see that happening. I don't. Me personally, Aaron Rodgers is not coming back this year. And even if you're talking about playoffs, the Jets might not even be in the playoffs, so it's not even going to matter. Aaron Rodgers will be back next year. But Kirk Cousins, I mean, maybe you trade for him. Zach Wilson's been playing somewhat better these last couple weeks, but I think right now, Kirk Cousins, I think you kind of ride with Zach Wilson, and then Aaron Rodgers comes back next year, but we'll see. So it doesn't. Again, it was reported that it doesn't seem like the Vikings are going to trade him, but you never know. So, but somebody else they could possibly trade is Danielle Hunter, one of their pass rushers, and yeah, he could definitely be a guy that teams that maybe need another pass rusher and are in playoff contention. He's a guy that you could add him to your defensive line, and you got yourself another pass rusher. Because listen, getting really good pass rush. I mean, not to say that he's he was once a very good pass rusher. Obviously, now he's getting up there in age, has dealt with some injuries, but definitely could still help out a team. But you know what? It's never bad to have too many pass rushers on your team. So so he's another candidate that they listed in this article. Brian Burns of the Panthers, again, same thing as Danielle Hunter. A guy that, if a team really needs help on their defensive line, he could be somebody that you could add and, help out your defense. So that's somebody else that they have listed. And a lot of Denver Broncos were listed who are playing tonight, who we'll talk about later in the show. But they have Garrett Bowles listed, their offensive tackle, Frank Clark, another pass rusher, Kareem Jackson, and both wide receivers, Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton. I mean, I remember, from a couple weeks ago, as you guys all probably do as well, the post-game interview with Garrett Bowles and him talking about how ever since he got drafted, all he's done is lose, and it's just it's very depressing to hear that from a player. So I think he would love to get traded to a team that definitely needs some offensive line help, because there's definitely teams that need help there. I mean, if I'm the Giants, maybe I try to trade for him, even though they're not going anywhere. But Garrett Bowles, I mean, if he does end up getting traded, you hope he gets traded to a team that's contending for something. I mean, same thing with Frank Clark. I mean, you feel bad for Frank Clark. You go from playing for the Chiefs that just won the Super Bowl to now the Broncos who are in last place in your division. So, he could be somebody that can help somebody out that needs a pass rusher. Same thing, Kareem Jackson, although he's not a pass rusher, he's a safety. And, again, if you need some help in your secondary, that's somebody else that maybe a team could use. And then you got two wide receivers, Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton. I mean, I could see Sutton getting traded. Jerry Jeudy, maybe they hold on to him. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, listen, Russell Wilson hasn't been playing that bad this year. And, you kind of take away his two top receivers. And, what does that leave him with? But, yeah, I mean, it's possible they both get traded. I could see Sutton definitely getting traded to another team. Maybe Jeudy they hold on to. I don't know. But, yeah, a lot of Denver Broncos listed as their season continues to spiral out of control. A couple of Jets are listed. McCole Hardman, he's a trade candidate. The Jets are trying to work to get him somewhere else. And the Jets signed him in the offseason, and they just have not used him, which is a little surprising. But, hey, maybe the Chiefs can get him back. The Chiefs could definitely use him. I know that. That I feel like would make sense, but, we'll see. And Carl Lawson, also another defensive lineman. Again, team that needs a pass rusher, he's a candidate for that. Hunter Renfrow is an interesting name. I would like to see him traded because the Raiders just do not use him. I mean, and heck, Devontae Adams only got 4 targets the other day. But their top receiver right now, is Devontae, but you would have thought it was Jacoby Myers after the game he had the other day against the Packers. But Renfrow, he's a guy that they just flat out do not use at all. And he had a 1,000-yard season in 2021. And, they just do not use him. I would like to see him on a different team because I feel like if he gets used, he's a good receiver. And I'm also saying that because I also have him in one of my dynasty leagues too, and I would like to see him, get some points there. Um, because he's one of my depth wide receivers, and now he's non-existent. They just don't use him, and he's a good player. But Marquise Brown is also another candidate as well. The Cardinals, they're not going anywhere this year, and again, a team that needs wide receiver help. The Chiefs come to mind, of course, when it comes to that. You need a wide receiver, and you're in contention. He's somebody that maybe a team could use. You got Jalen Johnson and Darnell Mooney next on the Bears. Again, a team that might need a corner. Johnson can help out in that category. And, of course, again, same thing with Mooney as a wide receiver. Team that might need a wide receiver, because he's not really getting used. I mean, you got DJ Moore and Kenneth. They're getting targets, of course, and Mooney's kind of like the forgotten man right now in that offense, it seems. So we'll see what happens there. Chase Young also they have listed defensive end for Washington. I mean, again, need a pass rusher. Obviously he had a torn ACL. The Commanders, they declined his fifth-year option. So, maybe Washington moves him. We'll see. But, yeah, it's because he's dealt with some injuries the last couple of years. So Washington doesn't look like they want to pay him. So, again, a team that needs a pass rusher, that could be a guy that, teams maybe go after. And then they got some Patriots listed as well. Kendrick Bourne, Hunter Henry, Juju Smith-Schuster. Again, for receiver help. And, Hunter Henry, I think, he's been probably one of their best. I mean, not that it's really saying that much, but he's been one of their best offensive weapons, the last couple of years. And, again, that's not really saying much. So if a team needs them, these guys, I mean, they could maybe go out and possibly trade for them too. Juju Smith-Schuster's dealing with some injuries, so you don't know. But, he could be a guy that you trade for or get him for cheap. So, but then there was also another article that on CBS, and this is also rumors. So Hunter Henry, or not Hunter Henry, Derrick Henry and Devontae Adams could be moved possibly. And I would like to see that for both of them, especially Devontae, because he only got targeted 4 times the other day. I mean, against the Packers too, his former team. I mean, I don't know how you... I really don't understand how you do that. Like, that doesn't... Like, that's that's his former team. And, how do you only target him 4 times? Now, I know he's dealing with a shoulder injury right now. But, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense how you only target him 4 times. And he only had 45 yards. So... Also, another thing that was interesting, and I didn't touch upon this, they had Preston Smith, a linebacker, covering him. That just didn't make any sense. And of course, he broke free from him and was wide open. I don't know why the Packers thought that was a good idea, but I don't know. So, but yeah, again, I mean, imagine Devontae Adams got traded back to Green Bay, or maybe the Chiefs got him. Well, that's not going to happen, though, because the Raiders would not trade him within the division. That just wouldn't happen. But I don't know. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to this topic here. So in the next part of the show, we are going to now then talk about the injury report. Go through some of the notable injuries there, guys that are questionable or doubtful or probable going into this week. So stick around, and we will be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we are going to discuss the injury report for this week. And towards the end of that first segment, now it's getting to that point where it's allergy season, and I could just feel my nose starting to run. So I had to, and that was towards the end of the segment, and I'm like, we gotta wrap this segment up quick because this is terrible that this is happening right now. So we'll go through the injury report here. So, the Broncos, they got some guys that are questionable. Frank Clark is dealing with an illness. DJ Jones and Baron Browning. I think it says they're out. And then Greg Dulcich. There we go. Okay, I know his name, and I know if you watch the baseball podcast, I have problems with names. Right now, he's questionable with the hamstring. But the three guys I just listed before that, it appears they are out for this game. I mean, I'm looking on CBS. So, Travis Kelce's got the ankle. George Karlaftis, he's got the hamstring. Tommy Townsend, their punter, he's dealing with a knee injury. So they're all questionable. I think Kelce's going to play tonight, right? Should. Well, let's check old Sleeper here for fantasy and maybe see if that tells us anything. So I'll go. Well, I don't have Kelce on any of my teams, but I'll have to go to one of my friends who has him. And, it says he's expected to play. So, yeah, I figured that was going to be the case. Then we'll go to some of these other games. So, Jadeveon Clowney. So, we got the Ravens and the Titans. So, Jadeveon Clowney, he's dealing with an illness. Odafe Owe, dealing with an ankle. And safety, Geno Stone, they all didn't practice. Odell Beckham Jr., he was limited after leaving Sunday's loss to Pittsburgh with an ankle injury. I mean, Odell's just dealing with it. It's just unfortunate, what's kind of happened to Odell Beckham Jr. because he was once, on his way to being, the best receiver in the league. And, I mean, after, the Giants traded him, it's just kind of gone downhill from there. And, even before that, I mean, he tore his ACL in 2017. And, it's just ever since then, it's just gone downhill from there. So, And then offensive tackle Morgan Moses, he was limited after being inactive during last week's loss to the Steelers. So, I mean, listen, the Ravens are just dealing with a ton of injuries right now. So, and then for the Titans, Treylon Burks, he's got a knee injury, and Jeffrey Simmons has got a shoulder. They haven't practiced, but Simmons says he plans to play on Sunday, so that's encouraging for the Titans. When it comes to Commanders-Falcons, not many major injuries for Washington right now. Curtis Samuel, he has a finger injury right now, something like that, but he was a full participant in practice. So, and then for the Falcons, Bud Dupree is dealing with the wrist. Caleb McGarry is dealing with the knee. Jonnu Smith with an ankle, but they were limited. So we'll see what happens with that. Khalil Herbert, now we're moving on to the Vikings and Bears. Khalil Herbert, he's going to miss, I think it seems, a couple weeks. So, and their rookie running back, Johnson, he had a concussion. So Deontay Foreman's actually going to finally play because, they signed him and they have not really used him that much. It's been Johnson and Herbert, running the ball, and they've done a good job there. So with those injuries, Deontay Foreman's going to, start playing. Equinemius St. Brown has a hamstring. Eddie Jackson's still dealing with a foot. And actually, Cole Kmet appeared on the injury report. He's got a hamstring. They were limited participants in practice. And this isn't good for the Vikings, although I feel like he is going to play. Jordan Addison's dealing with an ankle. He was limited, but he's going to get a bigger workload now with Jefferson being out. So if he's out, then you got KJ Osborne as your number one wide receiver, and then you also still have Hawkinson as well. But even here it says the Vikings had every player practice in some capacity, outside of Jefferson. So so that's the injury report on that front with that game. Then the Seahawks and the Bengals. DK Metcalf still dealing with a rib injury. Damian Lewis an ankle. Kobe Bryant has a toe injury. Artie Burns hamstring. So they were all held out. So yeah, that's not good on that front. Charlie Cross, their tackle, he's dealing with the toe. Phil Hayes, their guard, is dealing with a calf, and Jamal Adams, he suffered a concussion against the Giants, and linebacker Jordan Brooks has a knee, and they were all limited. T. Higgins, who missed last week against the Cardinals, he was a limited participant on Wednesday, along with starting cornerback Awuzie, dealing with a back injury, and both players are labeled day-to-day according to Zach Taylor. But it's encouraging that they both practiced in some capacity. So with the 49ers and the Browns, Dre Greenlaw, George Kittle, and Trent Williams, they just had rest days. Elijah Mitchell, he's still dealing with a knee injury, and listen, when he plays, he's good. It's just, guy just cannot stay healthy. And then also Aaron Banks, guard, he was limited. Deshaun Watson, again, did not practice due to his shoulder injury. And it says if he's unable to go, it's going to be P.J. Walker that gets the start. So it's not going to be DTR because, he started a couple weeks ago against the Ravens. But P.J. Walker, who was the basically the XFL MVP, and, won some games for the Panthers last year, he would be in line to start. Joe Bitonio, Myles Garrett, and Njoku, they all didn't practice. So, yeah, that's not a good sign because, obviously now if Watson misses, and they're going up against the 49ers this week, so yeah, that's not good. Mari Cooper was given a rest day. Jerome Ford was limited, and Ethan Poschik was limited. He's got a chest, a knee, and a foot injury. That's not good. That's really bad. Panthers and Dolphins. Miles Sanders, he's dealing with the shoulder injury. Derek Brown, Brian Burns. So those are some of their good players. And Panthers right now are 0-5. I mean, going up against the Dolphins now, it's not good. It's not good. And then on the other side, you got Jalen Phillips and Jeff Wilson. They practice in a limited capacity. They're going to need Jeff Wilson, the Dolphins, just because now with Achane being out, and most are dealing with some injuries. I mean, Jeff Wilson's going to play a role in their backfield now, with some of the injuries they're dealing with. Obviously, we talked about Anthony Richardson. He's on injured reserve. Mo Alley Cox is dealing with a concussion. Braden Smith dealing with a foot and a wrist. They were the only active Colts who did not practice. So I guess that's good. So the Colts are going into this game relatively healthy. Zay Jones, only player who didn't practice for the Jaguars. I mean, this is going to be a competitive game. I really do believe that. And it's also a Gardner Minshew revenge game. The Jags, they picked up a huge win against the Bills on Sunday to get themselves back on the right track. But, the Colts, they gave them some problems in week one. And I know that was with Anthony Richardson, and now he's not there. It's going to be Minshew. But Minshew is a serviceable backup. And, I think the Jags, they haven't looked so great this year. So we'll see what happens. But I expect that to be a competitive game. Olave and Cameron Jordan, they were limited for the Saints. Derek Carr was a full practice participant. Obviously, he was dealing with the back injury, shoulder injury. Olave's dealing with the toe. Cameron Jordan's dealing with the back. So, Tank Dell's dealing with a concussion. Laramie Tunsil, a knee. They didn't practice. So, that's big going into this game. I mean, listen, C.J. Stroud's been good. Now he's got to go up against this defensive front for the Saints. So it's not going to be easy, but, we'll see what happens. Raiders and Patriots, Juju Smith-Schuster, Demario Douglas, they didn't practice. Trent Brown, Trey Flowers, they were limited participants. I mean, I think this is a game that the Patriots could win, but we'll see. Devontae Adams for the Raiders. He was a non-participant due to his shoulder injury, but I mean he played on Monday, so he's probably going to play this week as well. And then the Raiders, I mean Max Crosby, Marcus Epps, David Long Jr., Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker. They were all limited, but I'm assuming they're all probably going to play. The Cardinals, Marquise Brown was not practicing due to an illness. A lot of illnesses. Elijah Higgins' illness. Jalen Thompson dealing with the hamstring. So they all didn't practice. Keontae Ingram, Garrett Williams, Jonathan Ledbetter. They were all limited. So that's for the Cardinals. For the Rams, Kevin Dotson, Ernest Jones, Laurel Murchison, Joe Noteboom, who's a big name that's on the offensive line. He was limited. But, I mean, I think this is a game the Rams should win. I mean, again, we'll talk about it tomorrow. But, yeah, so that's the injuries going into that game. Eagles at Jets, Darius Slay, he didn't practice. Fletcher Cox, he was limited, and Nick Sirianni said we'll see when asked about his status. And then on the Jets side, DJ Reed was limited, but it seems like for the most part, the Jets are coming into this game with all their guys playing. Obviously, last week, Vera Tucker tore his Achilles, which was a huge loss. So, I mean, Fletcher Cox doesn't play. I mean, I guess, it's good for the Jets. They don't have to deal with him, in this game, but we'll see. For the Lions, Amon-Ra St. Brown was limited. Jahmyr Gibbs didn't practice. Brian Branch didn't practice. But St. Brown, he missed last week, so hopefully he's back for the Bucs. Mike Evans was the only player on the Buccaneers that didn't practice. So we'll see. And the Bucs are definitely going to... Todd Bowles is saying that the veteran is coming along and that the team would have a better idea of his status by Friday. So we'll see. But yeah, that's the injuries from there. Daniel Jones, Wan'Dale Robinson, Andrew Thomas, Darren Waller, they didn't practice for the Giants. So they're already dealing with injuries to Barkley and Andrew Thomas, but now if you don't have Waller and Daniel Jones playing, and that game is still on Sunday night. It's just, but we'll see. If you watched the show yesterday, I said they shouldn't play Daniel Jones, and I still stand by that. And also they have Saquon Barkley as limited on Wednesday, so maybe he makes his return on Sunday. Both tight ends for the Bills are limited. Dawson Knox dealing with the wrist, Dalton Kincaid a concussion, but they were both limited. Dane Jackson dealing with the foot, and Balon Spector. They opened up the 21-day practice window for him, so he's designated to return. So we'll see. And they don't have any updates on the Chargers and the Cowboys. But yeah, those are all the injuries. I tried to run through every single game, which I pretty much did. Yeah, that's the injury report. So we got a lot of injuries. We'll see what happens tonight. Of course, I'll preview that in the final part of the show. So with that, we are going to take our second break of the show. And then when we come back, we are going to talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And are they legit? They got a 3-1 record right now, leading the NFC South. So we will get into that when we come back from our second break. So stick around, and we will be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And we are back here on the GSMC football podcast. And for the third part of the show, we are going to talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and whether I think they are legit or not. They've gotten off to a good start. I think they have definitely surprised a lot of people. I think many people thought they were going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. Obviously, the offseason, Tom Brady retired, so he's no longer there. So they went in and, they brought in Baker Mayfield, who bounced around a little bit. Well, has bounced around the last couple of years. I mean, he was on the Browns and went to the Panthers, and then they got rid of him, and then the Rams signed him because of all their injuries with Stafford getting hurt. And now he's on the Bucs. And, again, people just didn't think the Bucs were going to be that good. And listen, I mean, they're 3-1 right now, and anything can happen. But right now, I mean, I think the Bucs are legit. Now, that doesn't mean that I think they're like a Super Bowl contender or anything like that. But I definitely think they could be a team that makes the playoffs. Maybe win a playoff game at home, depending on who they play. I mean, the wins, I think their most impressive win was against the Saints in New Orleans. Because I had the Saints winning that game. I really thought that, I thought it was going to be low scoring, and I thought the Saints would take that. But, Baker Mayfield threw 3 touchdowns in that game. The first week of the year in Minnesota, you would think the Vikings were going to win that. But, Baker played okay in that game. He only threw for 173 and 2 touchdowns. One of them was to Mike Evans. The other was to Trey Palmer. Then they won 27-17 over the Bears. But, the way the Bears have been, other than last week, it wasn't I think, like I said, the most impressive win for me was against the Saints. 26-9, Baker threw for 246, 3 touchdowns and a pick. And, they got a lot of those guys. They still got some guys from their Super Bowl, their Super Bowl run. Shaq Barrett's back, so that's big for them. Levante David is still there. So, the team is still, and you still got Mike Evans and Chris Godwin on offense. So, but I just wanted to pull up the graphic that I have for today. And unfortunately, I cut off Baker's face because I'm using StatMuse again. StatMuse has become my best friend now. So this is Baker through the first 4 games of the season. He's got a 101.5 passer rating, 882 yards passing, 7 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, which is really good. Touchdown interception ratio is great. Now again, it's a small sample size, and obviously it could be completely different by the end of the year. Well, it's going to be completely different by the end of the year. But listen, for Baker, I hope he does well. I'm a Baker Mayfield fan. I would say I am. I would say he's one of my favorite players in the league, I would say. And you're probably asking why. I'm like, I don't know. I feel like for some players, for me, it's just kind of like, yeah, I like this guy. Let's see what he can do. But yeah, I've been a fan of his, and I've kind of and listen, I'm not like a Baker Mayfield apologist. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say he's the greatest thing ever, and but I just feel like he dealt with some adversity. The situation in Cleveland. He hurt his shoulder, and in 2021, and this is after they made the playoffs in 2020 when the Browns were a playoff team and they won a playoff game in Pittsburgh. I know it was in front of no fans, but hey, it still happened, and they almost beat the Chiefs. But, he gets hurt. Browns don't make the playoffs, and then they go out and they trade for Deshaun Watson. They toss Baker aside. And honestly, Deshaun Watson doesn't look that good. So, and then Baker goes to the Panthers and really doesn't play that well. Goes to the Rams and he wins that game, where he had to learn the playbook in like 2 days, and they beat the Raiders. And then the Bucs sign him, and you know what? He looks good. Again, they lost to the Eagles, but you know what? I think he's definitely looked good. And when you got Mike Evans and Chris Godwin now to throw the ball to, I mean, last year he wasn't throwing to Cooper Kupp on the Rams. I mean, he was throwing to Ben Skoranek and Van Jefferson. Now he's throwing to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So, and the Bucs, they got a tough game against the Lions this weekend at home. You know what? I think they can win that game. I don't know if they will, but I think that's a winnable game. Then they play the Falcons at home in Week 7. I think that's a winnable game. The Falcons are not a good road team. Then at Buffalo, Week 8, that's going to be tough. So I don't know if they're going to win that. But then you got the Texans and the Titans. Those are both winnable games. At 49ers, that's going to be tough. We saw what they did to Brady last year, 35-7. Might see something similar to that. But then you got the Colts, the Panthers, the Falcons, the Packers, the Jags, the Saints at home, and then at Panthers. I mean, their schedule is favorable. Their schedule is definitely favorable. I really think that it's going to be between them and the Saints for the division. But you got to like that schedule. And I think they could maybe win 9-10 games, get into the playoffs, because that might be what it takes to win this division. And you know what? Maybe they win a playoff game. Now, again, I'm not saying that, they're going to go on the Super Bowl run. I don't see that. But I think the Bucs are legit, because if their defense is playing well and Baker, limits the turnovers, which, I mean, two interceptions in 4 games. I mean, for him, it's, that's good. Like I said before, the touchdown to interception ratio has been good. I think this Bucs team can, be a playoff contender. Not a Super Bowl contender, but a playoff contender. I don't think this is a phony team. I mean, I don't think they stack up well against the 49ers. We saw how they played against the Eagles. And the Lions are better. But you know what? I think they can beat the Lions. And it's at home. So, they're, and again, it's all, also the other thing too is the status of Mike Evans. I mean, he didn't practice again like I talked about in the last segment. But I don't know. I think that's a winnable game. So, and listen, they already beat the Saints. So, that's good, getting that divisional win. They haven't played the Falcons yet, but I think they're better than the Falcons. I like Baker over Desmond Ridder. The Falcons, I mean, I just right now they're 3-0 at home, but not a good road team so far. 3-0 at home and 0-2 on the road. But I think the Bucs are better than them. I do, and the Bucs are better than the Panthers too. I mean, the Panthers right now, they're one of the worst teams in football. So, and it's a weak division. It's a weak division. I mean, the Saints offensively, they're still trying to work through some things. I mean, the offense still isn't great. They won 34-0 against the Patriots, but look at how the Patriots are. So, right now, I like the Bucs to win the division, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, Baker's playing really well. I mean, listen, if he's got protection, he's got the weapons, I mean, he could do well. I mean, he did well with the Browns when, they had their good offensive line and the good running game with Chubb and Kareem Hunt, and weapons to throw to. So, and listen, I don't know if Baker's going to, I don't think Baker's the elite of the elite. He's not. But you know what? I think if you give him the right supporting cast around him, he could take you to the playoffs. And he won a playoff game. And I think many people forget about that. Then he goes to the Panthers. I mean, you got Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore, but, still, you're not. Matt Rule was the head coach. And then they got rid of him. He goes to the Rams with McVay, but, the Rams were dealing with a ton of injuries themselves. He did play well. Now we got another shot with the Bucs, and they're in first place. So, but again, I don't think Baker is like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But you know what? I think there needs to be more respect to his name and how he's been playing this year. And he could be leading a team like the Bucs to, right now they're in first place, and he could maybe get them to the playoffs, and we'll see what happens. Now, I don't really expect them to do much again because, I mean, the 49ers are the class of the NFC right now. They're the best team. And the Eagles beat the Bucs. Um, you know, Baker had his worst game of the season. But again, it's expected. The Eagles are one of the best teams as well. But let's see how they stack up against the Lions because I view the Lions right now as the third best team in the NFC. So maybe see how you do against them. I mean, the Bucs already beat the Saints, so right now I put them ahead of the Saints. But yeah, let's see how this game goes on Sunday. I think it should be a very exciting game. I hope Mike Evans plays, so they got their full supporting cast. I mean, they got some young receivers that Baker's building a rapport with. You got Rashad White, who's a good running back. Home game. I mean, we'll see. I think the Bucs could definitely win. And if not, I think they could keep it close. But, we'll see. But I think, for now, let's give Baker Mayfield some respect. Now, things can change, of course. We get to the end of the year and the Bucs just, collapse and, end up having one of the worst records in football. Then we come back and we have a different conversation. But I think for right now, 3-1, they got a favorable schedule. I think this team can be a playoff team. I think it definitely can. And again, I'm rooting for Baker. I want him to do well because, I mean, what happened over in Cleveland was unfortunate. And you know what? I think he got humbled from this whole situation because I know a lot of people questioned his attitude and things like that. And, obviously he got made fun of for being in all those commercials. But you know what? I think all this kind of changed him as a person. I mean, you could kind of see it, in some of his interviews. And, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But, I'm rooting for him, and I hope he does well. And I hope he leads the Bucs to the playoffs. I really do. So yeah, that's basically it when we're talking about the Buccaneers. What do you guys think? Do you guys think the Buccaneers have are a playoff team? Do you think that they're a phony and that they're going to end up flaming out and missing the playoffs? But I went through their schedule, and listen, there is a lot of winnable games on their schedule, which I think they could definitely get to 9 to 10 wins if they keep playing the way they are. I mean, and look at what Mike Evans is doing with Baker. I mean, last year, obviously, there was a lot of stuff going on in Tampa. The offensive line wasn't very good last year, so Brady was checking it down a gazillion times. But, Mike Evans is looking like he's going to have a bounce-back season. He didn't have a ton of touchdowns last year. So I listen. I think the Bucs could be a playoff team this year with a better record than they did finish with last year. Because last year they finished 8-9 and won the division. The most important thing is right now it's a weak division. It still is a weak division. I don't trust the Saints. Falcons I don't really trust either. And the Panthers obviously are 0-5. So, but again, that remains to be seen. But so that's it when it comes to talking about the Buccaneers. So in the next part of the show, the final part of the show, we'll get into the Broncos and the Chiefs game for tonight. But again, I just want to remind you guys to donate or tip and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show, and for bonus coverage materials that are not covered by this broadcast, make sure to go to patreon.com and search up GSMC Sports Network. So we're going to take our final break of the show, and then when we come back, we will preview the game for tonight, and then that will basically be it for today's show. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are going to now preview the game between the Broncos and the Chiefs tonight. And we'll go through the first we'll talk about, for the bettors out there. Right now, the Chiefs are a 10.5 point favorite over the Broncos, and the over-under is 47. And 47, I hate that number because I did a parlay last week, and I talked about this earlier in the week. And one of the legs didn't hit, and that was picking the over in the Giants-Dolphins game. I picked over 47.5. And what did the final score end up being? 47. So, yeah, I hate that number right now. So that's what the game's currently at. Obviously, this game is in Arrowhead. Chiefs are leading the division at 4-1. Broncos are in last place at 1-4. So, I mean, who do I like in this game? Of course, I think it's the Chiefs. However, I do think that the Broncos will cover the spread tonight. It's kind of crazy, but I don't know. For me, I don't really trust the Chiefs with some of these big spreads. Now, of course, I picked the Bears when they were getting a lot of points against the Chiefs a couple weeks ago, and the Chiefs just absolutely dismantled them. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I mean, listen, now the Broncos, they came back and beat the Bears, and it's a divisional game. And you know what, the Broncos, they played some close games against the Chiefs last year. I mean, the Chiefs were killing them in Denver, and then the Broncos ended up coming back and making it close. Russell Wilson actually got hurt in that game. But against them in Kansas City, I think they lost by 10. So, and listen, the number's 10.5. So, I'm going to take it. And I don't know. I just don't really trust the Chiefs. I mean, listen, they didn't play well. They didn't really play that well against the Jets. I mean, they won against the Vikings only by 7. And this is a divisional game. And Russell Wilson, he's been good this year. So, you know what? I think the Broncos could keep it, within 2 scores. I mean, tonight could be, a blowout, and I'm completely wrong about it. Because, listen, the Broncos' defense has been terrible this year. So that's one thing that really worries me, because that's kind of been the strength of this team for a while, because they've been going through that QB carousel, Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch, Joe Flacco, Drew Lock. I mean, it's just, and now Russell Wilson. But that's been the strength of the team. And now all of a sudden the defense, I don't know what's happened to it, but it's literally one of the worst defenses in football. And the offense doesn't look that bad. It really doesn't look that bad. I mean, Russell Wilson, we went over it yesterday with the stats. He's top 5 in passer rating. He's got 1,200 yards passing, 11 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. I mean, that's really good. That is really good. It's just the team is 1-4. So, and then on the other side, you got Patrick Mahomes, who's having a good season as well. I mean, there's no surprise there. Almost 1,300 yards passing, 10 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. Isaiah Pacheco, he's had a good start to his season, 325 yards rushing. He's got 3 touchdowns. Travis Kelce's got 3 touchdowns after missing one game, the first game of the season. And honestly, if he plays, the Chiefs probably win that game, so they should be undefeated right now. But I don't want to disrespect the Lions, because the Lions are one of my teams this year. So, but I think if Kelce plays, I think the Chiefs probably win. But and right now, Marvin Mims is actually their leading receiver. He's got 246 receiving yards and a touchdown. He's been good. They're rookie. So, and then you look at the stats for both teams. Usually what I do is I just look on CBS. So right now, the Broncos, they're averaging 328 yards per game on offense, which is like middle of the pack. And the Chiefs, their defense gives up 301 yards per game. So, and that's 9th. Passing yards, the Chiefs are 8th. They average 263.6. Broncos average 242. So Chiefs are 8th. Broncos are 13th. Rushing yards, the Chiefs are actually 12th. I mean, Pacheco's been very good this year, and I think he's going to have a very good game tonight. I hope so. Again, for fantasy purposes as well. Broncos are 19th. Then in points, Chiefs are 9th, and the Broncos are 10th. So that's an encouraging stat. Yeah, I mean, listen, I really do think the Broncos can. I mean, but their defense, that's the one thing that's going to throw a wrench in this whole thing. And then when you look at defense now, Chiefs pass defense, they're 14th. Broncos are 28th. Against the run, Chiefs are 11th. Broncos are 32nd. And then points allowed. Chiefs defense is 5th. Broncos defense is 32nd. So, yeah, that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a problem. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I really think that the Chiefs are gonna win, but I really do think the Broncos can't cover. And I'm talking myself into it. I'm gonna take the Broncos with the spread, but Chiefs are gonna win outright because they're not losing outright. It's just not happening. But I don't know. We'll see. I mean, the Chiefs' defense isn't bad. Broncos' defense is horrendous. But I don't know. The other thing too is something's off with the Chiefs. They're still doing well. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know. It seems like they're struggling a little bit on offense. Excuse me. I mean, obviously they dismantled the Bears, but the Bears, were one of the worst teams in football. I mean, that might change after this week, depending on how they play here. I mean, because, they just put up 40 points against the Commanders, and maybe, they played well against the Broncos too, but the Broncos are bad, of course. But, outside of that, though, I mean, you lose in week 1. I mean, you barely get by the Jags, 17-9. I mean, you barely get by the Jets, and then you barely, you struggled a little bit with the Vikings, but you ended up winning that game as well. Yeah, I mean, I could see the Broncos keeping it close. It's just their defense. I mean, listen, the Chiefs went up against the Bears' defense and just completely shredded them. So they're probably going to do the same to the Broncos. But you know what? Russell Wilson's played well. And you know what? Maybe they don't cover. But maybe they get that back door. Hey, if they backdoor it, they still cover. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, the Broncos, they need to win this game. I mean, they're in last place. Their season is probably going nowhere again. But, and how does that look for Sean Payton? Because, Sean Payton did a lot of talking, especially, taking shots at Nathaniel Hackett. And now how does that look? You're coaching one of the worst defenses in football, and you're in last place. And at least with Nathaniel Hackett, the defense was good. Now it's one of the worst defenses in football. I mean, they're at the bottom in a lot of categories. Now they're going up against Patrick Mahomes. I mean, listen, at wide receiver, I mean, the Chiefs, they're a team that needs a wide receiver. They just do. I mean, I talked about some of the trade candidates. I mean, maybe the Chiefs try to inquire on some of those guys because, I mean, Rashee Rice, he's got a couple of touchdowns this year. Valdez-Scantling, Justin Watson, those are like your deep ball guys, but you're not scared of them. Although Justin Watson had a couple of nice catches on Sunday. That 3rd and 17 that Mahomes just threw up to him on 3rd down, and he, ripped it away from the defensive back of the Vikings to make the catch. Kadarius Toney's been a disappointment. Obviously the first game of the year he had all those drops. The Chiefs definitely need a wide receiver. Running game, I think they're fine. Pacheco's been solid. You got McKinnon as well, to be the change of pace guy. And, of course, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's kind of the forgotten guy as well. And, of course, you have Travis Kelce. That's your number one wide receiver. But I think they need another receiver. And last year, I mean, they won the Super Bowl with most of those guys. I mean, Valdez-Scantling, Toney, Sky Moore, who I forgot to mention. But they don't have Juju Smith-Schuster this year. Although, I guess he would make some difference, but, not really. And I think some people would point to the fact that they miss Eric Bieniemy. And I think that's kind of true. But you know what? They got Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce. I mean, Chiefs are going to figure it out. I'm not worried about them. I mean, in 2021, it looked like people were like, hey, they might not even make the playoffs the way they're playing. Teams figured them out. And then what happened? They made it to the AFC Championship game. Now, it was great up until, Hold on, try to hold in a sneeze there again. It was great up until the second half against the Bengals in that championship game, because then they only scored 3 points. But then they won the Super Bowl last year without Tyreek Hill. So you know what? I'm not worried about them. They'll be fine. But there's just something's off with them right now. But I think they'll figure it out. Now, to be honest, I don't really look at them as the favorite in the AFC at the moment. But we're still we're almost at the halfway point in the season. I mean, the Chiefs are going to be one of the final teams. And Patrick Mahomes has never played in a road playoff game. So, I think ultimately, I mean, they might end up with the 1 seed still. And it's got to go through Arrowhead, but we'll see. But yeah, I mean, this is a big game for the Broncos. I got them covering. Let me know what you guys think. How do you see this game shaping out? Is it going to be a blowout? Are the Broncos going to cover? I hope the Broncos cover. It's a risk, but it's a risk I am willing to take. But I'll at least sit here and say the Chiefs, they'll cover the spread. So I'm going to say, let's do a final score here. I'm going to say the Chiefs win. I'm going to say 30-23. I'm going to say it's a 1-score game. Chiefs put up 30. Broncos, they cover the spread. So that's my prediction. Let me know what you guys think, when it comes to this game. Tomorrow, we'll preview the rest of the games for this week. We'll recap the game from tonight. That's like one of my favorite, and I'll do my picks as well. I'm really looking forward to that. That's, recapping all the Monday and Fridays are like the best shows, because like you recap all the games, and then Friday you're like picking all the games and previewing all of them. So I'm really looking forward to that tomorrow. And then also we got I'll be doing my GSMC baseball podcast after that, and recap all the division series there. So make sure to tune into that if you're a baseball fan. But yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to the show today. I'll be tuning into the game. Got some, and also hopefully Pacheco for fantasy purposes does well. I think he's the only person I have from the Chiefs on any of my teams this year, and Butker, of course. I'm a Harrison Butker guy as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it with the show today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll be back again tomorrow, 11 a.m. We'll recap this game, and we'll preview all the games for this upcoming weekend. So really looking forward to that. Working on getting all 4 parts of yesterday's show up on both the YouTube channels, so in case you missed anything. I mean, the full live stream is there, but of course, if you want to just go to the segment that you want to watch, I'll be working on that once I wrap up here. Well, I also have to do the Patreon after this. That's literally right after I'm done streaming here. So, but yeah, with that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. I'll try to get to all the comments, of course. And so I will be going to record the Patreon now. And we'll be back again tomorrow. Preview all the games for this weekend. So, with that, I'm Kenneth Grunfelder signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day. Enjoy the game tonight, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Take care.